Terrifier 2 is out, and it's so scary it's making people puke. We're not kidding. There are actual reports out there where people have passed out during the movie. This movie did so well on the horror scale that Stephen King himself decided to say a few nice words. Keeping that in mind, let's look at why Stephen King is right about Terrifier 2. Let's also look if this movie is really that scary. First up, Stephen King praises the movie in his own way. Stephen King's short review of the slasher sequel Terrifier 2 may seem like it's a weird one, but this famous author hit one secret ingredient that made the movie a huge hit. Terrifier 2 is making a lot of money at the theaters right now. The sequel to Terrifier cost only $250,000 to make, but it has already made more than $10 million in the United States and doesn't look like it will slow down anytime soon. King especially liked Art the Clown's most recent work, Terrifier 2. He even went onto social media to give it a short summary of why the book is so appealing in the first place. He wrote, "Terrifier 2, grossing you out the old-fashioned way." Even though this doesn't sound like much of a compliment, King's nonfiction book Danse Macabre has a note from the author that explains what it really means. He seems to think that terror and horror are more pure and pretty admirable goals for a genre artist, but he also admits that gross out is also a pretty valuable genre. Let's be honest, the huge success of Terrifier 2 in recent weeks has made this point loud and clear. Coming up, Stephen King's take on gross out horror. In Danse Macabre, Stephen King's nonfiction book about the art of horror, he tries to make his readers feel terror. And this isn't just any form of scare. What King goes for is a unique feeling of unknowable, overwhelming fear. But he often settles for horror, which is the more common yet still thrilling. The idea is to fear something that's all too real. King's description of horror fits the little pale girl from Terrifier 2. She has a mysterious past and is far away from Art the Clown's horrible crimes, which is low-key unsettling. She is very creepy, and the fact that she doesn't do any of the horrible things that happen in the slasher sequel makes the other bad guy in Terrifier 2 even scarier. But the main character of Terrifier 2 is Art the Clown, and there's nothing subtle or vague about what makes him scary. King's analysis of the genre comes into play here. After talking about terror and horror, he says that he doesn't mind pure gross out when neither terror or horror can be reached. The author agrees that there is a place for what he calls gross out, which is pure gore, body horror, and gruesome shocks. The fact that people loved Art the Clown's horrifying kills shows that this is true. Since the rise of elevated horror, gross out horror hasn't been as popular. This makes the success of Terrifier 2 a pretty cool turning point. What's more, breaking down Terrifier 2's gross out horror. Terrifier, basically the first movie, was scary, but Terrifier 2 focuses more on gross out content as much as real scares. Even though the sequel is still very scary, it's not really as dark and bleak as the first movie. Instead, it focuses more on shocking people with funny gore than the first movie did, which was more grounded and gross. In Terrifier, there were long scenes of torture and body parts being cut off. In Terrifier 2, though, they're focusing more on unique ways of showing gore. For example, that one scene where the trick-or-treaters eat candy out of a human head that's been hollowed out. We haven't really seen much of this gross-out horror, which uses shock value, dark humor, and big effects to create a gory but funny atmosphere in recent years. But honestly, helps explain why Terrifier 2 did so well. Lastly, King's comment explains why people are drawn to the movie. The original horror movies of 2022 are doing well financially, but the genre is still split between more self-serious, dramatic psychological horrors and sillier, more self-aware horrors. Even though the term elevated horror hasn't been used much in recent years, the idea behind it still has a big impact on horror movies. Think about it. Even big box office hits like Halloween Ends and Smile spend most of their time on character studies, with a few scary scenes thrown in. These are long dramas about troubled people who slowly give in to their dark side. On the other hand, horror hits like Terrifier 2 show a very different kind of scary. While slow burn, thought-provoking horror has its place, what makes Terrifier 2 interesting is that it doesn't stop being gross. It is, by far, the silliest of Art the Clown's movies. It is also the most successful of the slasher series so far, which is not a coincidence. When you add this to the success of Barbarian, a recent hit that didn't shy away from the horror genre's sillier excesses, you can see a pattern. Like Barbarian, Terrifier 2 brings back the kind of gross-out horror that people missed when the horror genre tried to get more respect from critics. And now, is Terrifier 2 really scary enough to make people pass out? To start with, there are actual reports of people passing out. The movie is scary because it has a lot of bloody deaths, and apparently this has created a lot of buzz about it. Reports that people in the audience fainted and threw up have given Terrifier 2 an unexpected marketing boost. The thing is, it doesn't try to scare you with jump scares or other tricks of the mind. Also, it doesn't have a haunting score or the sense of supernatural dread that made Smile work. The series is scary because the bad guy is like Pennywise, likes to kill people in horrible ways, and has no idea how the human body works. In the past few weeks, there have been reports that scenes in the new horror movie Terrifier 2 are making people pass out and throw up. There was a report where someone said a guy behind them passed out cold and crashed onto their chair. Then there's another where someone heard a guy puking really hard and loudly in the bathroom. Another person shared a picture from the theater that showed emergency workers helping a person. They said that the theater called an ambulance because their friend had passed out. Hey, if there's so many reports, it can't be made up, right? Up next, Damien Leone says people expect terrifying scenes. The movie's director, Damien Leone, said that people who have watched the first movie know what to expect. He also went on to say that the people who worked on Terrifier 2 tried to outdo the famous scene from the first movie that involved a hacksaw and that everyone talks about. He said that in the new movie, they tried to top that scene because their fans, who have always been very loyal to them, have been giving Art the Clown a lot of praise. And so the team behind the movie guessed that they want some of that flavor to be present in the sequel too. In one scene from Terrifier 2, Art mutilated one of his victims in what has become known as the bedroom scene. The scene is very violent and shows torture in a very clear way. If you're someone who easily gets scared, this scene may not be for you. These kinds of killings have become common in the Terrifier movies, and they remind people of the terror they felt in the first movie, which is great. Finally, the movie gets some mixed reviews. Most sequels don't do better than the first one, especially if the first movie did so well. Die-hard fans of the first movie already know what to expect from Terrifier 2, even though it feels much bigger and builds on Art's story. The second movie does a great job of adding to the blood and gore that we've come to expect from the series, but it doesn't have as much of the shock value that made the first movie so scary. By the second movie, Art is also a part of the town's history, so his presence doesn't seem as big. Even though the sequel isn't as scary, it's a great addition to a lot of scary slasher scenes. But then there are some people who think that the second movie isn't that scary and that these reports of puking and passing out are actually a marketing ploy. To this, Leon actually responded and said that he swore on the success of the film when he said those reports were not fake, and that he wishes their marketing team had come up with it because it sounds smart. Terrifier 2 and Smile have done well at the box office, adding to a year full of scary movies. Damien Leone's movie is one of the few that has done well with only word-of-mouth advertising. At this point, it seems like the longer it stays in theaters, the more popular it will become. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on Terrifier 2? Have you watched the movie yet? Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like these. See you in the next one.